The trigonometric functions like cosine and sine are fundamental in calculus. In calculus, we use radians instead of degrees, so that a radian is defined as the arc length subtended by the angle in the middle of a circle divided by the radius of the circle. So it's a division of two lengths. The radian then is a dimensionless unit because it's a length divided by a length. So how do we convert from degrees to radians? Well, 360 degrees then is the circumference of a circle, which is 2 pi times the radius of the circle, divided by the radius of the circle in radians, so that's given 2 pi. So 360 degrees is 2 pi radians. And radians then is dimensionless because the argument of a cosine and a sine should be dimensionless, particularly when we're manipulating the functions in calculus. So the cosine and the sine function are very useful to engineers and scientists because they're periodic, right? They're the prototypical function that repeats itself. So we know that cosine of x plus 2 pi n, where n is an integer, is equal to cosine x. It's periodic with period 2 pi. And sine of x plus 2 pi n is equal to sine x, as long as n is an integer. We can do a quick graph of the cosine function and the sine function. So the cosine function, everyone probably knows this, looks something like this, with a value of 1 when x equals 0. So this is y equals cosine x. And the sine function looks something like this. And has the value of 0 when x equals 0. If we look at these two functions, they're essentially the same function, but they're shifted to each other. So if we take y equals cosine x and shift it to the right, we can get it to match sine x. And if we take y equals sine x and shift it to the left, we can get it to match cosine x. The way to write that mathematically is cosine of x minus pi over 2 equals sine x, and sine of x plus pi over 2 is equal to cosine x. The other fundamental relationship between these functions is the Pythagorean theorem, which goes by, in terms of the cosine and the sine, goes as the square of the cosine, cosine squared x plus sine squared x is equal to 1. And that's just an expression of the Pythagorean theorem. The other useful identities are the addition formulas. So sine of x plus y equals sine x cosine y plus cosine x sine y, and the formula for cosine is cosine x plus y equals cosine x cosine y minus sine x sine y. Besides the cosine and the sine, there are other trigonometric functions that you should know the definition of in calculus. They are the tangent. So tangent of x equals sine x divided by cosine x. They're the cotangent, which we write as COT of x, which is the reciprocal cosine x divided by sine x. The other ones are the secant. So the secant of x is 1 divided by the cosine of x and the other one is called the cosecant and has the symbol CSC of x, and that would be just 1 over sine x. The last thing that is important to know as a pre-calculus of the trigonometric functions is what's called polar coordinates. We won't go into depth here, but it's something that will be used. So polar coordinates means that we draw a circle. And we try to locate a point on the circle. Could be anywhere. Let's say it's here. We draw a line through the point. So the circle has some radius, so we'll call that r. And this line makes an angle theta with the x-axis. So this is the x-axis and the y-axis. And then the polar coordinate relates x and y to r and theta. So using trigonometry, x equals r cosine theta, and y equals r sine theta. And these are called, r and theta are called polar coordinates, x and y are called Cartesian coordinates. So let me review. We're going to be using trigonometric functions in calculus. The two main trigonometric functions are the cosine and the sine. The auxiliary trigonometric functions are the tangent, the cotangent, the secant, and the cosecant. It's useful to remember these definitions. Particularly, the tangent gets used a lot, and the secant gets used a lot. Cosine and sine are periodic, with period 2 pi. They're related to each other through a phase shift. They satisfy the very important Pythagorean identity, the cosine squared plus the sine squared equals 1. And you should have already learned these addition formulas for sine and cosine. I'm Jeff Chasnov. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.